Why do you think the public was captivated with this story?
It was something that was so totally unexpected.
Someone had broken into the home, killed Matthew with the gunshot, and then took Mary and the girls and left.
A church pastor is dead, and his family is missing at this hour.
When you add religion to murder and then sprinkle in abuse, and everyone's in shock and no one knows who to believe.
This is pretty telling. The killer unplugged the phone.
Yes.
So no one could call anywhere for help.
People were frantic, thinking that there may be a killer on the loose.
The most important thing to them right now is to find Mary Winkler and find the 3 girls.
So how does that missing wife and mother go from lost to found?
Ma'am, get out of the vehicle. Get your hands out of the vehicle now. Get out.
Winding up in a police investigation.
I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem, and so my ugly came out.
I guess my ugly came out. What does that mean?
We could not have fathomed what actually did come out, not in our wildest thoughts.
This is stuff that doesn't happen to church folks.
The ugly side came out. Somebody ended up shot dead.
It became one of the biggest, most talked about stories in the entire country. And it all started here in the heart of the Bible Belt, in this small church in the tiny town of Selmer, Tennessee. Matthew Winkler would preach to his congregation every Sunday morning here about right and wrong and about living your life in the service of God.
On March 22nd, 2006, everyone was gathering at the church, ready for the Wednesday night service.
Matthew Winkler was pretty new at being the new head preacher, so he certainly didn't miss any services.
It's unheard of for the preacher, his wife, and his daughters who are there every week, and they don't show up.
But even though they kept watching the door, waiting for him to come through it with apologies and messages of love for the congregation, it never happened.
Overcome with worry and concern, some of the members of the congregation take a 5-minute drive to the church parsonage behind me. It's where the minister, Matthew, his wife, and 3 children lived. Once inside, the church members make a shocking discovery.
We were knocking on the windows, knocking on the doors. At that point is when I felt that something was wrong, because the key was on the inside of the door, the TV was on, and there was no answer.
At some point, they go inside the home, walk through, calling his name, calling Mary's name, calling for the girls.
We're yelling, "Is anyone in here? Can anybody hear us?"
They looked around. No Mary, no little girls. Everything looked normal, nothing looked out of place. But the master bedroom door was shut. They walked over and opened it, and all their nightmares were answered.
Saw Matthew laying there on his back. A foam was protruding from his mouth and nose. We knew pretty obviously that he was dead at that time. So we called 911, and then we all gathered in the living room and held hands and prayed for Mary and the children, because we had assumed that they had been abducted.
Church members couldn't fathom who would kill their preacher. This was a man who, in fact,
It's in his blood, literally. Mary grew up in a Church of Christ family also.
Mary was raised in a strict household in Knoxville, Tennessee. At South Doyle High School, she was known as a reserved student with a good sense of humor.
She didn't draw a lot of attention to herself. That's also true of many women in the Churches of Christ Church. They don't want to bring a lot of attention on themselves.
Mary was cute as a button. She was always ready with a smile and a touch on the hand. And she just was the perfect embodiment of a Church of Christ woman.
Mary and Matthew met at Freed-Hardeman College. It's a college affiliated with the Church of Christ. And Mary has said that initially they were just friends, but then they started dating, and apparently Matthew must have liked her because 3 months later he asked her to marry him.
Both Matthew and Mary dropped out of school because they couldn't afford it anymore, and then Matthew got work as a youth minister in McMinnville, Tennessee. How would you describe the Church of Christ to someone who's not familiar with it?
It's very conservative, a Bible-based church. We say we have no creed but the Bible.
They believe in the literal interpretation of the Bible. And there are scriptures in the Bible that says that a woman is subservient to the man. The board of elders, the preacher, all of those in the leadership positions are men.
Tell me about Matthew's temperament.
Gregarious, somebody who could go into a room of strangers and make friends within minutes.
Magnetic personality.
Magnetic personality.
Your impression of Mary?
Mary seemed like a frail and vulnerable woman. She had a downcast look. She would not make eye contact, and she was walking 3 or 4 steps behind Matthew.
Matthew had this feeling he couldn't measure up to his father. He bristled under just being a youth minister. He wanted to be the preacher of his own church.
It was in January of 2005 that Matthew and Mary Winkler moved here to the town of Selmer. Matthew had just landed his dream job, named the head pastor here at the Church of Christ.
Selmer is a sleepy little town in Tennessee, right by the border with Mississippi. It is a place where people sit out on their porch drinking sweet tea and talking with their neighbors as they walk by. It's very Southern in so many ways.
One of Elvis Presley's first outside of Memphis performances was here in this county. The highway going through Selmer to Elvis's home is called Rockabilly Highway.
What is this town like?
Small town.
Yeah.
Close, unit family.
Pretty religious? I see a lot of churches here.
Yes. Almost every corner you'll find a church.
True happiness is found in God's Word. True happiness is not only found in God's Word, it's found by living the way God says to live in that Word.
The Winklers found a wonderful church in Selmer, Tennessee, and the people of the community and congregation embraced them and welcomed them. It seemed like the perfect scenario. That is.
On March 21st, 2006, in the small town of Selmer, Tennessee, Matthew and Mary Winkler, along with their 3 little girls, settled in for a quiet evening at home. They order pizza and watch the animated movie Chicken Little.
The sky is falling! The sky is falling!
But somehow, this everyday peaceful family activity would turn into a gruesome crime scene with seemingly deadly intention.
Matthew Winkler was shot in the back with a 12-gauge shotgun. 12-gauge shotgun is either used to hunt or personal protection, and it's used to kill. My initial thought was someone definitely intended to kill Matthew Winkler.
Members of the 4th Street Church of Christ find their beloved minister, Matthew Winkler, dead in his home, just minutes away from the sanctuary. They immediately call the police. Where were you when you got the phone call?
I was at home, of course, in bed, or getting ready to go to bed. Then I immediately started reaching out to the agents and the crime scene team to get them to start responding to this location.
When the police came into the house, they cleared all the church members out, but they interviewed them as well and started picking apart the scene, looking for anything that could give them information.
They would have started with the interior, taking photographs, taking measurements.
Nothing was out of place. It wasn't ransacked, looking for valuables. But what would stand out is when you got to the back bedroom.
There were blood stains on the pillows. There were blood stains on the floor.
Matthew was laying beside the bed, and that's where he was found.
But you think he was shot while he was still in bed?
Yes, and he would have rolled over.
Investigators were thinking of a lot of things that this scenario suggested.
You have someone fatally wounded. No one else is around. Is this some type of robbery that had turned into murder?
Was this a vendetta or was it a kidnapping? And it just went wrong.
At that point, you don't know?
You don't know. I mean, it's a mystery.
What do we have here?
This is actually the bed.
This is the bed.
That would have been where he was sleeping.
Could have been shot from here or from here.
Well, probably from this side.
Right.
He was shot on the bed, so that tells you that the shooter had no confrontation with him. There was no defense that Matthew could have put up, being that he was shot in the back.
And this is the shotgun shell.
It's actually the round that killed him.
Over here, this is the bird shot.
That's some of the bird shot
recovered from his body.
Correct.
This is the actual shotgun.
Yes, sir.
Can you show it to us?
That's 12 gauge pump.
What kind of damage can it do? Close up.
Well, lots of damage.
A 12-gauge shotgun shooting birdshot. When it makes impact, it's going to explode with all of these pellets. And Matthew had somewhere over 70 pellets in his back.
And for investigators, each crime scene tells its own story. And this one would reveal a chilling detail. It seemed that the perpetrator wanted to seal Matthew's fate with absolute certainty.
They were very disturbed when they noticed the telephone, clearly placed in a position that was out of Matthew's reach. And it was disconnected from the wall jack.
So the killer unplugged the phone.
Yes.
So no one could call anywhere for help.
That's what we believe.
Even if he was able to survive or even live long enough to reach up and grab the receiver and hit zero, it wasn't going to work.
There is breaking news that we've been following all day out of Selmer, Tennessee. It is a case of tragedy in a small town. A church pastor is dead.
While investigators were combing through the crime scene, news of the death of the much-beloved preacher Matthew Winkler shook Selmer to its core.
And, you know, it's just shock. Everybody's just in shock about it.
This is the 4th Street Church of Christ here in Selmer, and all day long, church members have been coming and going. You can see it in their faces how distraught they are about the death of Pastor Matthew Winkler.
Who would have done something like this? Everybody loved him from what we understood.
People were frantic, thinking that there may be a killer somewhere in their community.
And do police have a motive they're working on? Any kind of theory here?
Now, they are telling us very, very little about this.
Matthew was often approached by people who had addiction problems or financial problems. What if Matthew turned one of those people away? What if they had come back in anger?
An Amber Alert is issued for 3 little girls.
Police need to find Mary Winkler, 1-year-old Brianna, 6-year-old Mary Alice, and 8-year-old Patricia.
They, along with their gray minivan, were missing. Were they in danger?
An Amber Alert is issued for 3 little girls. They disappeared from their home in Selmer, Tennessee. Their mother is missing as well. Church members found their father, Pastor Matthew Winkler, dead.
With the young minister found dead in his bedroom, the community of Selmer was on edge.
There was a possibility this could have been a burglary that turned into murder.
Who is here in our community would do that? You know, this person's loose. People were worried.
Take a look at the van the mother and the children may be in. It is a 2006 gray Toyota Sienna.
The most important thing to them right now is to find Mary Winkler and find the 3 girls.
Almost 24 hours after the discovery of Matthew's body, there's a sighting of a gray minivan matching the description of the Winklers' missing vehicle. It was spotted in the seaside community of Orange Beach, Alabama.
That shoreline is particularly spectacular. They call it the Gold Coast of Alabama.
1025, get there. I was traveling westbound on the road directly behind us.
That's it. 10-4, that's the vehicle.
And this van pulled right out in front of me, a Toyota Sienna minivan, matching the description of the van we'd been looking for.
10-4, we're pulling in the parking lot, 1033.
Knowing that there was a possibility that Mary and her girls had been kidnapped, they were extremely cautious approaching that vehicle. They had their guns out.
Ma'am, get out of the vehicle. Get your hands out of the vehicle now! Yeah, step out of the vehicle. Put the vehicle in park and step out.
There she was, Mary Winkler, in a pink jumpsuit, looking as innocent as anybody walking down the street could look.
With no supposed kidnapper behind the wheel.
Walk back! Walk back! Keep walking!
Mary Winkler goes from being a potential victim to a suspect in her husband's death.
She got out and she never asked why she was stopped, why there was officers pointing guns at her or anything. She made no really expression on her face, and she was detained.
Hey girl, how you doing?
After we detained her, we ran to the minivan to check the welfare of the children. They just kept repeating, what's going on, where's mommy going?
Did my mama do anything?
Shortly after Mary's arrest, police search the minivan and they make a stunning discovery.
It was soon after Mary was apprehended by the Orange Beach Police Department. A shotgun was found in the minivan.
You've heard the term, we found the smoking gun. Well, that's exactly what we thought. We had found the smoking gun, and it was just our job now to put the facts and the details together.
Back in 2006, Stan Stabler was a corporal with the Alabama Bureau of Investigation.
I received a call from Orange Beach Police Department that evening. They requested that I come to interview Mary Winkler.
It's March 23, it's about 9:55 p.m. We're at Orange Beach PD. I'm Stan Stabler with ABI. If you would just speak your name for me, please, ma'am.
Mary Winkler.
When we first started, I got a lot of background information about her, their marriage.
How long have you been married?
9 years, 11 months.
How was your marriage?
Good.
We talked about the children.
I met your daughters, and very sweet girls. Had McDonald's, they eat, and they're wrapped up in blankets, warm, watching a movie.
Thank you.
I wanted to build a rapport with Mary where she felt comfortable with me.
Want something to drink?
Water's fantastic.
Okay.
Sitting across from him is this eerily calm mother of 3, 400 miles away from home. Stan Stabler wondered why did Mary Winkler drive her girls all the way to Orange Beach, Alabama?
They've never been to a beach that they remember. This is just my last time to be with them. I just wanted to be with them before they had bad days. To have a happy day.
She wanted to spend some time with the girls because she felt that she would not be seeing them after she was caught.
I asked her about anyone else involved, an affair.
Y'all didn't have any major problems going on?
No.
Anybody else involved with either party?
Oh, no.
She was not as emotional as a person should be if they learned about the murder of their spouse.
Just go step from step and tell me what happened.
I just can't.
Why can't you talk to us? Is it me?
No.
I mean...
No.
She was very strong-willed not to disclose a lot of details.
I want to hear your side.
I appreciate I feel like you have genuine concern, and I do appreciate you.
Tell me why a mother of 3, a wife of over 9 years, almost 10 years, what would make you do this? Why?
No comment.
It was a very, very strange interview.
Has he ever hurt you?
Not physically.
She said she did not want to talk about Matthew because she didn't, quote, want to smear him.
No matter what, in the end, I don't want him smeared.
All we are seeking the truth. And we're not here to smear anybody.
Corporal Stabler asks Mary about that shotgun that police suspect she used to kill her husband.
Did you load it?
I messed it up and put it back out.
Where was it?
We keep it in the top of the closet out of reach.
The truth started coming out. Mary admitted she was holding that gun. She didn't admit that she pulled the trigger. She said she didn't remember that.
How many times did you shoot? Just one time?
Surely not.
Huh?
Surely not.
How do you know you didn't shoot more than once?
I don't.
And then finally, after almost 2 hours of questioning, a possible motive.
Oh, I love you dearly. But gosh, he could just nail me in the ground. I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem. And so my ugly came out.
When the ugly side came out, somebody ended up shot dead.
For almost 2 hours, Corporal Stan Stabler prods Mary Winkler about her relationship with her late husband, Matthew.
Mary Winkler eventually, during that interview in Alabama, did tell investigators that he picked on her. What she was describing as someone who was abusive.
How would he run you down?
Just chewing on you, yeah.
Just fussing at you,
His
nagging all the
mistakes.
time?
And some well-deserved, by all means.
I think it's old.
But gosh, I don't want to talk about that now. I love you dearly. But gosh, he could just nail me in the ground. Which I just took it like a mouse. Didn't think anything different. I never spoke up.
She told me he was a good man. He was a good father. He was a good husband. She said, you know, at times he would get mad. She related it to blood pressure problems.
But he was so good. He was so good, too. A lot of times he had high blood pressure. But he'd never go enough to the doctor to get medicine for it. There's no sense, you know. Just say the lady was a moron, evil woman.
She said she had had thoughts in the past about killing him.
Yeah, I didn't just get up and say, hey, let's see how this thing works. I've been battling it not to do that for him. And I don't know why.
Was he chewing on you when it happened?
I don't even know.
Mary had said that she got a job. Then she said her self-esteem started coming out. And then she started speaking up about things she didn't like.
I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem. And so my ugly came out.
When the ugly side came out, somebody ended up shot dead. So that's what Mary's ugly side is. The side that shoots her husband in the back with a shotgun.
Mary waived her right to an extradition hearing and willingly went back to face justice in Tennessee.
While in Tennessee, investigators from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation take another statement from Mary, which she initials.
And this time, Mary drops a few bombshells about the morning Matthew was killed. While she never admits to pulling the trigger of the shotgun, Mary does tell TBI agents she heard a loud boom, wiped blood from Matthew's mouth, and told him she was sorry.
It became real obvious that there was only one thing for the police in Tennessee to do, and that was to charge her with murder.
The startling account of a pastor's wife accused of killing her husband becomes big national news.
This is Good Morning America.
That murder mystery that has stunned everyone. A popular minister in Tennessee gunned down in his home, and the confessed killer is his young wife. Why?
People were wondering what would cause them to have their ugly come out.
Knowing Mary the way I did, I knew that he had to do something to push her over.
Mary's sisters say they saw a change in Mary once she got married.
I don't remember hearing her laugh. She was not a happy person.
Mary's other sister, Amanda, and her father, Clark, say they saw bruises on Mary.
I didn't say anything because if I was to say who gave that to you and that would make her mad, I wouldn't see her again.
I saw terrible bruises, the heaviest of makeup covering facial bruises. So one day I confronted her and I said, Mary Carol, you are coming off as a very abused wife. And Mary Carol would hang her head and say, no, Dad, everything's all right, everything's all right. And several times I talked very seriously to her about leaving him, and she just did not want to. I feel so bad about this. I feel like I have a part in it. I should have talked more to Mary Carol.
There were people who said that they did see a short temper in Matthew. According to the neighbor, that their dog had gotten into the Winkler yard, and Matthew yelled at the neighbor.
He said, keep the damn dogs out of our yard or we'll shoot him. He had a temper on him. I've never met a preacher like him.
This never rose where it was ever a volatile encounter with somebody. It was just being stern, like the dog. Hey, please do this. I've warned you.
As investigators dig deep into the Winklers' lives, they come to believe that Matthew's killing may actually have been about money.
That's what was the root of the evil in this whole situation.
According to them, Mary was knee-deep in financial fraud, and investigators suspect that weighing heavily on her mind was an upcoming trip to the local bank.
The bankers set a meeting for Mary and Matthew to meet at the bank on March 22nd.
I think she was desperate and afraid.
Mrs. Winkler is set for arraignment before a McNairy County judge.
After Matthew's death, Mary appeared in a Selmer courtroom, trading in her Sunday best for an orange jumpsuit.
It was somewhat of a shocking vision because she just does not look like anyone who could do anything like shoot her husband.
State of Tennessee versus Mary Carol Winkler. You're charged under Tennessee Code with first-degree murder.
After pleading not guilty to first-degree murder, Mary is led away in shackles.
Outside of the courthouse, church members stood in solidarity with the preacher's wife.
We had a special prayer for her at church last night, and we forgave her.
It's in God's plan, but there has to be a reason, because if we can't believe that, we cannot go on.
Mary's supporters believe that her years of alleged abuse culminated in the accidental shooting death of her husband. But investigators say the real motive in this case was money.
Early on in the investigation, TBI was interviewing local banks, and they more or less came to the TBI and said, "We got to tell you what's going on here."
Investigators have learned from bank officials that Mary was in over her head financially
after they say she got caught up in a so-called lottery scam, which was sweeping the country.
A lottery scam is when you get email or even a letter that tells you that you have won a lottery.
Here's how it works. The scammer sends a counterfeit check for an initial payment worth thousands of dollars. Now, in return, you're supposed to send them money to cover the processing fees.
The scammers make money off what you send them. Meanwhile, all you get is a worthless check.
Mary had entered all sorts of things. So when she got this saying that she'd won $250,000, she believed him.
What do we have here?
These are bogus checks.
So Mary Winkler got these checks in the mail.
Yes.
And she thought, wow, $4,880, $4,900.
Yeah. You're going to receive lots more once you send us the money, but she did not send the money back. She kept all the money. Back in those days, if a person deposited a check or cashed a check, they would actually receive the complete amount of money because it immediately went into your bank account.
Back then, you just didn't have the automation like you have today. So it could take weeks for the checks to come back as counterfeit. So when that happened, the banks wanted their money back from Mary, over $16,000.
And that is when investigators allege Mary cooked up a scheme of her own to cover her losses.
She was actually writing checks for one bank to cover checks at another bank.
What investigators say Mary was doing is called check kiting, floating funds between banks, and that's where the kite comes in.
And in doing so, she knew that she didn't have the funds in that bank to cover the charges, and that is an illegal act.
It's easy to see how desperation can lead you down that path where you're trying to find a way out and you don't know what to do.
Was there any evidence that Matthew, her husband, the minister, was in on this or knew about it?
We have no evidence because he never went to the bank. He never had his name on anything. These other accounts was in her name, so he wouldn't have access to her accounts.
According to investigators, Mary went to great lengths to conceal her alleged financial crimes from Matthew.
They say she opened up a personal account out of town, changed her mailing address to a P.O. box,
and she even tried to remove Matthew's name from their bank account. But investigators say Mary's alleged financial scheme fell apart after one late deposit sent her bank account into a tailspin.
I think it got a little out of hand because she got at some point like $5,000 overdrawn, which is a really bad position to be in. $5,000 in 2006 on a small town pastor's pay and a substitute teacher. You might as well say $100,000.
Things came to a head on March 21st, 2006. That day, Mary Winkler was working as a substitute teacher here at Selmer Elementary School. She receives an urgent call from the bank asking her to come in the very next day to clear up her overdrawn account. And they tell her to bring her husband, Matthew, along.
In fact, in this statement to TBI, Mary admitted to having a heated discussion with Matthew about their finances the night before the shooting. She says, "I had gotten a call from the bank, and we were having troubles. Mostly my fault. Bad bookkeeping." And then she goes on to say that the two were upset with each other and that she got to a point and snapped.
Do you think this is why she killed him?
Oh, yes. That somebody's going to have to face the music, and it was going to come back on her.
There must have been a lot of pressure on Mary to keep that away from Matthew. It was going to be embarrassing for the Church of Christ congregation. It was going to speak very loudly that something's amiss in this family. It's a reflection of the church. It's a reflection of God.
How's Mary feeling?
Prosecutors might think this is an open and shut case, but as Mary's murder trial gets underway, no one could imagine the twists and turns to come.
Mary Winkler had what appeared to everyone a marriage made in heaven, but behind closed doors, it was a living hell.
Miss Winkler, if you'll come forward, please, ma'am.
And when the demure preacher's wife takes the stand, dark and lurid details would soon come to light.
Did it hurt you?
Yes, sir.
Oh my goodness gracious.
This is stuff that doesn't happen.
And now he's got a hellacious shotgun wound in his back. And his wife wants you to believe that she was driven to it.
She certainly wasn't acting like someone who shot her husband in the back.
I don't know that anyone anywhere had any idea of what was to come in this trial.
So it got heated in the jury room.
How are you going to defend yourself? He threatened me with the shotgun many times, putting it in my face.
Mary Winkler appeared to have had a marriage made in heaven, but behind closed doors, it was a living hell.
When they brought out the shoe and the wig, there was a gasp in the courtroom.
Matthew wanted me to wear it to dress up.
Dress up for what purpose, Mary?
Sex.
Oh my God, wow.
That if you looked up spousal abuse in the dictionary, you're going to see Mary Winkler's picture looking back at you.
Was Mary Winkler a victim or a villain?
Will the real Mary Winkler please stand up?
A grand jury had indicted Mary Winkler on a first-degree murder charge for the killing of her preacher husband, Matthew Winkler. She pled not guilty and went back to McMinnville after her father posted her $750,000 bond. Mary's three girls continued living with Matthew's parents, whom they'd been with since Mary's arrest.
Everywhere, everyone was covering the story of Mary Winkler. When you put the story in a nutshell, this preacher's wife shoots her husband in the back while he's sleeping, and then takes her daughters to the beach. That sounds outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. How can you not follow that story?
Well, people were wondering what would bring someone to this breaking point. What would cause them to have their ugly come out? And I think that was the big question.
And the fact this happened in the heart of the South, in the Bible Belt, was like fascinating to people because it wasn't supposed to happen. These are supposed to be godly people. Well, you know, godly does not mean perfect. And Mary proved that very well.
So this is the cleaners where Mary worked.
Yes.
We're at the dry cleaners, Dry Cleaning Express, where Mary worked during her bond supervision. I would have to come and check on her.
What were your impressions of her during that bond period?
She was just real quiet, reserved.
We all just really loved her, and, you know, we got to be good friends. And we picked up a lot of new customers from her church that has decided to do business here because they want to be supportive of Mary.
But one question dividing the people of the town following the case at the time: was Mary actually the quiet preacher's wife everyone thought they knew, or was there another side to her, like the one Libby St. John and her husband at the time saw one night at a restaurant in McMinnville?
Well, we had been in there sitting at the bar, and Mary came in, and she was chain smoking cigarettes and drinking. It just seemed like she was so carefree that evening that it just shocked me. I almost wanted to go over there and say, listen, this isn't a good idea for you to be doing this. The owner of that establishment said while she was out on bond, she'd been there to celebrate several different occasions and her birthday recently. And so she'd been there several times. It just wasn't a one-off. You don't usually see Church of Christ preachers' wives smoking. She certainly wasn't acting like someone who'd shot her husband in the back.
And your husband at the time starts taking pictures.
He took them with his cell phone. The pictures made quite a splash when they came out.
These cell phone pictures, first obtained by Action News 5, are the talk of this quiet town.
I remember the bar pictures, the very things that seemed completely out of character from what anybody's seen.
She was not supposed to be drinking.
Well, I think that basically it was not excessive alcohol. I think that's what was on the bond.
But it didn't look good.
No, I'm sure it didn't look, no, it probably didn't look good. Didn't sit well with people.
The way this came to us, this was like walking into a Kafka novel. Nothing lines up with logic.
Her life was taking some strange turns that didn't make any sense.
Her outward appearance changed, her clothing changed. It was like someone flipped a switch.
And when she started kind of hanging out at night, there was a feeling that this was a little quick. Why are you doing this? Maybe were you that the whole time? And it just gave people pause.
Will the real Mary Winkler please stand up? Is she the quiet, docile minister's wife, or is she something quite different?
With the trial gearing up, everyone was about to hear a tale they never expected from the preacher's wife.
Yeah, I don't know that anyone in Selmer, and few people anywhere, had any idea of what was to come in this trial.
Mary's murder trial began on April 9, 2007, with the prosecution pushing for a first-degree conviction. The case was one of the biggest things the small town of Selmer, Tennessee has ever seen. The media put this tiny courthouse right in the middle of the public's attention.
Television stations from Nashville, from Memphis, some from Huntsville, Alabama, were there in the courthouse because this was such a big story.
What was interesting was Mary Winkler arriving with her attorneys, appearing about as meek as you could appear.
Inside, the courtroom was packed, and the crowd included members of both families.
You had Matthew Winkler's parents there. Mary Winkler's family was there, her father.
We may begin with opening statements. The state may proceed first.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Walt Freeland. I'm an assistant district attorney. My strategy, like in every case, is to put on all my facts, because facts are stubborn things. You have to set aside whatever you think might have happened and just listen to the facts. There is no good reason why Matthew Winkler was murdered by Mary Winkler.
The jurors are about to hear Mary's interrogation tape, where she says she snapped because of Matthew.
He would knock your self-esteem down?
No, just chewing whatever. And that's the problem. I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem, and so my ugly came out.
Just kind of got to a boiling point and just boiled over.
There's no sense, you know, just say the lady was a moron, evil woman, and let's go on with it.
Prosecutors bring out that big, powerful shotgun that was used to kill Matthew. The point being to show the jurors that this could not have been an accident.
You couldn't just pick the gun up and pull the trigger unless it had been racked.
Could you prime it or pump it or whatever it takes to get it in a functioning position? Could you do that?
Yes, sir. By racking the shotgun, it places a shotgun shell in the chamber so it can be fired. The fact that she did tells me she had already thought in her mind what it was going to be like to shoot that shotgun. All that leads me to believe premeditation.
But to rebut the prosecution's theory of premeditated murder, the defense will call their star witness.
The defense calls the defendant, Mary Carol Winkler.
The only person alive who knows exactly what happened the day Matthew was killed.
Somebody said to tell the truth, the whole truth, so help you God. Yes, I do.
The most important witness in this trial, the one that everyone anticipated, takes the stand. And she testifies to some pretty shocking stuff.
The jury has just heard audio of Mary Winkler's interrogation, where she seems to imply that she suddenly snapped because of her husband Matthew's treatment of her.
I have nerve now, and I have self-esteem, and so my ugly came out.
Prosecutors tell the jury that Mary's real motive for the killing had nothing to do with Matthew's treatment of her. Instead, they say that the motive was about that alleged financial fraud they claim she was knee-deep in.
This was a premeditated act because Mary Winkler was in control.
Although investigators believe that the money was the motive in this case, they never charged Mary with any financial crimes.
She was the one that handled the finances. The finances were in shambles.
A bank investigator testifies that Mary had allegedly been scamming banks out of thousands of dollars by writing checks to herself and then floating money from one account to another.
These deposits were drawn off of the same bank, First State Bank, and were deposited within days of each other into the ATM at Regions.
So this check from Mary Winkler to Mary Winkler for $2,000 was deposited in the Mary Winkler personal account on March 20th, 2006.
Correct.
March 22nd, 2006, Mary Winkler and her husband Matthew were supposed to go to the bank and explain where the money came from, where the money went, and how they were going to pay it back.
The house of cards which she had set up was falling down. March 22nd was the day it ended up that he was shot.
The prosecution claimed that Mary killed her husband Matthew because of the deep financial hole that she had dug for herself. But when it was the defense's turn, they painted a very different picture of Mary, claiming she was the victim in this case and Matthew was the villain.
Mary Winkler appeared to have had a marriage made in heaven, but behind closed doors, it was a living hell. The proof will show that Mary was his whipping boy.
Part of the defense strategy was to put Matthew on trial. They put on the stand a church secretary who claimed she overheard some really harsh words coming from Matthew to Mary.
The tone, the sounds were of anger, berating.
What did you say to Matthew?
Those are things that a husband shouldn't say to a wife. You are to be a leader by example and not by force.
Another witness to take the stand was Mary's own sister, Tabitha. And she said Mary complained that Matthew tried to keep her away from her family and control her every move.
How would he act to her?
He pretty much dictated anything that she did. She wasn't allowed to make any decisions for herself. She would have to say, I have to check with Matt, and it was usually no.
There was testimony from the defense about how Matthew could act aggressively, but there was not a lot of information. And the jury may have thought, well, if he was this awful man, wouldn't more people have seen more?
Defense ready to call its next witness.
We are, Your Honor.
But the defense then called Mary herself, and she testified in explicit detail.
The defense calls the defendant, Mary Carol Winkler,
about exactly what she said happened behind closed doors.
Miss Winkler, if you'll come forward, please, ma'am.
As she took the stand, all eyes in the courtroom were riveted on Mary.
Mary Winkler was up there, appearing meeker than you would think anyone could. For much of the testimony, it appeared to be her head was down in shame.
Now remember, the state argued that Mary intentionally killed her husband to cover up a messy web of alleged fraudulent check kiting. But on the stand, Mary had a simple answer. Matthew made her do it.
Who directed those deposits?
Matthew told me where to put them, and I put them in the bank.
Mary also testified that Matthew knew that the banks were demanding answers over the financial issues with their accounts.
He was upset, and I just tried to continue encouraging him if he would please go in and do that.
Did he say he would?
He said he would, but he had been saying that for weeks.
Mary explained to the jury that she didn't stand up for herself because she was so afraid of Matthew's volatility, his temper.
How did he act when he yelled and screamed at you?
He flailed. He just was all over. He would just be furious. He went from certain threats to more serious threats.
Can you be specific to the jury about any threats?
He told me one time that he was going to cut the brake lines out of the van. He threatened me with the shotgun many times, putting it in my face. He told me if I ever talked back to him, that he would cut me into a million pieces.
Dan and Diane Winkler sat through a trial where they heard some awful things about their son, and it had to be very difficult for them. And their faces were stoic, but you could also see how it was affecting them too.
When I asked her about abuse, I said, well, you know, did he physically abuse you? And she said, oh no. I believe her to this day that he never abused her.
There was no indication from any of the people interviewed that Mary had ever disclosed it to them as a friend, or it never came out about any physical abuse. She described Matthew as being a fine man, and there was never a hint of any abuse.
But it turns out that Mary's testimony about alleged abuse on the part of Matthew was just the tip of the iceberg. This case is moving in another direction.
The one question that nobody will forget is when Steve Farese handed her a bag.
What's in that sack, Mary? Put it up on the screen.
When she was testifying to all of this, oh my God, wow. This is amazing testimony. This is shocking testimony. Almost couldn't believe it.
On trial for the murder of her preacher husband, Matthew. Mary Winkler tells jurors that she was living in a marriage from hell.
I had asked Matthew to have a divorce, and he absolutely denied it. That would not be allowed.
That was not an option?
No, sir.
According to who?
Matthew.
Preachers can't get a divorce. People want to know, okay, how do you preach the things you preach and you're divorced?
Mary's defense team would also expose what they said was another dark side of the Winklers' marriage. One that would take this trial into a surprisingly different arena.
What's in that sack, Mary?
Shoe and a wig.
Show me the shoe that's in there. Put it up on the side there. Is that the kind of shoe that you would wear to church?
No, sir.
Where'd you get that wig, Mary?
From Matthew.
Well, why was that shoe bought, Mary?
Matthew wanted me to wear it to dress up.
Dress up for what purpose, Mary?
Sex.
When they brought out the shoe and the wig and put those on the witness stand, there was a gasp in the courtroom. It was just a moment in this case, I think, that everything turned. And then hearing the preacher's wife accuse her dead husband of all of these things that were not allowed in the churches of Christ congregations. These were sins.
Mary testified that Matthew had porn up on a computer and wanted her to watch it.
What would occur after he'd ask you to look at the photographs?
Go have sex.
Did he ever ask you to engage in any type of sex that you felt was unnatural?
Yes, sir. He just wanted to have sex with my bottom.
Did it hurt you?
Yes, sir.
The people in the courtroom, when she was testifying to all of this, you could kind of see on their faces like, oh my God, wow, this is shocking testimony.
For the life of me, I have never understood how wearing platform shoes and a wig for your husband gives you the right to shoot him in the back with a shotgun.
While the details of the Winklers' sex life caused a huge buzz inside the courtroom, the questions at hand were why and how Matthew was shot to death. And for the very first time, people heard Mary talk about what she says happened that morning, describing how it all started with the cries of their baby daughter.
Matthew kicked me out of the bed. He just caught me somewhere in the low of my back and I was on the floor.
What happened next?
He walked out of the room and then I got up and went after him.
Mary said she then saw Matthew covering the baby's nose and mouth to keep her from crying, something that she said he had done before.
What was he doing?
Suffocating her. I said, could I please have her? He just threw his arms up and walked out and walked away from the crib.
Mary says she was so disturbed by this incident that she followed Matthew back to the bedroom and she wanted to confront him about it.
I just wanted to talk to Matthew.
What did you want to talk to him about?
I just wanted to stop being so mean.
Mary testified she was afraid to talk to her husband and then found herself holding Matthew's shotgun.
Do you remember ever having a gun, holding a gun?
Yes, sir.
Do you remember ever pointing a gun?
No, sir.
Did you pull the trigger?
No, sir.
Did you intentionally, purposefully kill your husband?
No, sir.
Did you love your husband?
Yes, sir.
You still love him?
Yes, sir.
Mary had been very vague and foggy about a gun going off, which is a classic defense statement. They use the passive voice. They don't say, I shot a gun. They say, a gun went off.
So what was it that led you into the position of accidentally shooting Matthew Winkler?
I just wanted to talk to him.
It wasn't an accident, was it?
Yes, sir.
You just wanted to talk to him and he wouldn't listen. So you shot him in the middle of the back while he was asleep. Now, has that memory come back to you, Miss Winkler?
No, sir.
You recall telling Agent Carpenter you remember hearing a loud boom and remember thinking it wasn't as loud as I thought it would be.
I don't recall telling him that.
Do you remember today if you told Matthew that you were sorry and that you loved him?
Yes.
The defense called a licensed psychologist to the stand who had met with Mary several times, and she testified that the reason Mary might not be able to remember the details of the shooting was because she had been traumatized by Matthew's treatment of her.
It's my professional opinion that Mary does suffer from a post-traumatic stress disorder, and at the time that this occurred, she was in a dissociated episode where...
Now the jury has a big decision. Couldn't Mary have gotten out of a bad marriage some other way? Or is she just a cold-blooded killer? This very debate is going to spark some fireworks in that jury room.
So it got heated in the jury room?
It did, very much so. Oh, I was ready to come across that table and strangle her.
This morning, the jury is in deliberations, and Mary Winkler's fate hangs in the balance.
Emotions ran high as jurors seemed hopelessly divided on whether Matthew Winkler's death was murder or a fatal accident.
There was some that didn't feel like she should get anything. They were ready to let her walk. They felt like he deserved what he got. And then you had some that was like, yes, she was abused, but she did take a life, and that she should get something out of it.
We were very stressed during that time because we didn't know how to work it out.
So it got heated in the
It
jury
did,
room?
very much so.
I hear that you got frustrated because one of the jurors wouldn't even admit that she pulled the trigger.
Yes.
Refused to believe it.
And I looked at her and I was like, what? I was ready to come across that table and strangle her because I thought that was completely ridiculous.
The jury also had doubts about the prosecution's claim that Mary killed Matthew to avoid embarrassment over their alleged financial troubles.
People did not care about the money aspect of it. That was not what was on our minds.
Even though she was called by the bank to go see them the next day, the day he was shot?
No, at the very forefront was the abuse. It never wavered from the forefront of our thoughts.
The jurors could convict Mary of first-degree murder, second-degree murder, voluntary or involuntary manslaughter, and it's anyone's guess where they were going to go.
And now you are looking at a live picture inside the courtroom. There you see Matthew Winkler's family, and they're all waiting for the jury.
After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury had finally reached a verdict.
And members of the jury are expected to read that verdict coming up momentarily.
Ms. Winkler, if you could please stand, ma'am.
And in true Mary Winkler fashion, she remained stoic as the verdict was read.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Mary C. Winkler, guilty of voluntary manslaughter.
There was a little bit of a gasp in the audience. I don't know that many people expected her to be convicted of anything less than first-degree murder.
With voluntary manslaughter, there is an intent to kill, but you were provoked by something.
There you see Mary Winkler's father, and he looks a little bit surprised there.
To the shock of Mary's supporters and the dismay of Matthew's, Mary will face just 3 to 6 years behind bars.
Would this jury have allowed Mary to walk free?
Part of them would have.
No comment.
They felt like she had already lived through prison with the life that she lived, and that it was justified and that she deserved to be free.
That's why you compromised and agreed to the lesser charge?
Yes, because I didn't want her to walk.
In Tennessee, 33-year-old Mary Winkler is awaiting sentencing after being found guilty of killing her preacher husband.
Mary, how you feeling?
On June 8, 2007, everyone gathered in the courtrooms for Mary's sentencing as she pled for mercy.
I think of Matthew every day in the guild, and I'll always miss him and love him. There were bad times, but there were good times, and I wish I could have that good Matthew and that we could live together forever.
If I were Matthew's parents, that statement would have felt like a kick in the teeth. It was so disregarding of their feelings on facing this reality.
Matthew was a wonderful person. He loved life. He loved his family. He loved the Lord God with all of his heart and soul and mind. The monster that you have painted for the world to see, I don't think that monster existed. There's been no remorse from you. You've never told your girls you're sorry. Don't you think you at least owe them that? You've never told us you're sorry. I think you at least owe us that.
I can understand why a mother would more than ask that. And I would think a mother, as in Mary, would also want to apologize. The damage is done.
When the judge handed down the sentence, you could have heard a pin drop in that room.
The defendant is hereby sentenced to a term of 3 years. Her sentence is to be served in split confinement with 210 days of incarceration, with appropriate credit to be given.
With time served, Mary Winkler spent only 1 more week in jail in this very cell, and then 60 days in a mental health facility. To her supporters, it was a clear victory, but to others, it was nothing more than a slap on the wrist.
People were very shocked by that sentence and really couldn't believe it.
Matthew's parents had to feel betrayed by the system. They had to feel as if the jury had been played.
When you found out that she was going to get such a short sentence, what went through your mind?
I was heartbroken, actually. I felt like I had failed. I felt like I had failed, like I didn't do my part, that I had let her off.
I believe she should have served more time, but we did what we did because that was all we could do.
After the trial, the town of Selmer remained divided over whether Mary really got justice. Meanwhile, for Mary, the saga isn't over.
After the sentencing, the public thought, okay, that's it. They've heard everything, but it was not.
She wasn't finished talking. She wanted to tell her story to everyone.
Hey.
Hi, Oprah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Tell me why you wanted to have this conversation today.
After serving an additional 7 days in jail, Mary Winkler finished out the remainder of her sentence at an undisclosed mental health facility. And while there, she had a visitor on the weekends. Turns out, while she had been working at the dry cleaners, she struck up a relationship with her boss's brother. His name, Darryl Pillow.
I saw interest in Mary, and I thought Mary saw interest in me.
Darryl Pillow says sparks flew. It was instant attraction when he first met Mary at his brother's dry cleaners.
I was attracted to Mary. I mean, we do have a lot in common. You know, we laugh, we got the same hobbies. It felt very normal. It felt like it was meant to be, you know, that we was meant to be together. I know the first time that we sat on the couch and I hugged her and she said, oh, this is, you know, I missed this, you know, and that's what she needed. She needed somebody to hold her and hug her.
I remember hearing that she may have had a new acquaintance.
She was just a very sweet girl. I mean, it felt normal to be with Mary. Now, I never felt scared or threatened. Our relationship was on, we had an adult relationship.
Even though Mary was in a mental health facility, Darryl says he would come to visit her on weekends. The two were able to get closer, and he says they even got to the point where they discussed marriage.
We kind of joked around about it, you know, but it wasn't nothing serious. It's not like we set a date or, you know, maybe years down the road it may happen. I don't know. But it, you know, the option's there.
But soon after Mary was released from the facility, Darryl says she ended things with him.
She just said, Darryl, I've got to be single right now. And I said, that's fine. She needs to be focused on her children. And that's where she's at right now. She is focused on her children.
Since her arrest, even though she had visitation rights, Mary's 3 daughters had been living with Matthew's parents, Diane and Dan Winkler.
But once back in McMinnville and now living with friends, Mary is on a mission to get those 3 girls back.
Mary's got a long way to go, but she's on her road. She's on the way. She's gonna make it. Since she's gotten back home, the Mary that we came to know and love, the grinning, the cutting up, you know, she's back.
Mary was determined to fight, and one way she could do that was by being the perfect parolee.
How do you think her time in jail impacted her life?
Well, she had time to think about what happened, I'm sure, and reflect on what she had done, and I'm sure she wanted to get out so she'd get back with her children as soon as possible. Her children are very important to her.
She lives and breathes every day for those girls. What she wants to do is get on with her life, let people leave her alone, get her girls back, and mourn her husband. That's her words.
Now back home, the once shy and demure former preacher's wife, who wanted a quiet life, raised eyebrows again after making one of her first stops the Oprah Winfrey Show, telling Oprah she hoped by speaking out, her story might help others.
An Oprah exclusive. For the first time, Mary Winkler, the wife who killed her pastor husband.
Mary Winkler appeared on Oprah just as she appeared on the stand. Very soft-spoken, very meek and mild. And but I remember Oprah wasn't buying any of it. You know, Oprah didn't let her off the hook.
Was a shotgun in the baby's room?
No, we kept it in the closet. It's just, I can't, there's a lot of things that don't make sense to me.
Yeah. Well, imagine, it doesn't make sense to me either.
I know.
She kept prying and asking her and just telling her, okay, help me make sense of this.
The gun is aimed at him at some point. Do you remember that?
Well, no, because when I heard the boom, I just took out of there and took off running.
And then Mary explained to Oprah the importance of getting those girls back.
I'm their mother.
You killed their father.
I did not want any of this to happen.
Even though the girls had been living at Matthew's parents' home, the Winklers wanted to formalize it. They filed a lawsuit to adopt their granddaughters and terminate Mary's parental rights.
Mary Winkler looked happy and confident when she walked into the courthouse in Huntington for another showdown with her former in-laws over custody of her 3 daughters.
But there's still one more turn to come in Mary's roller coaster ride of a life.
Her life seems to be normal, except for one thing.
One more startling secret to reveal.
Something else had happened to Mary Winkler that was surprising, shocking.
Since her arrest, Mary Winkler has been locked in a custody battle with Matthew's parents. And finally, after months without her children, they reach an informal agreement out of court, giving Mary permission to take her 3 daughters back.
My girls are my girls, and I'm their mother, and we were just put back together, and we've picked up where we were separated.
I know. Come here, Emma.
After finally getting her children back, Mary Winkler sits down for one more exclusive interview with Janice Broach to reveal yet another setback in her life.
Tonight, Mary Winkler is back, and she has a secret.
I had found out that Mary had been diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis.
My right hand and my right foot were completely disabled, could not use. And so I was very fortunate that I have been able to come back to full capacity.
17 years after she shot her husband, Mary Winkler lives a quiet life.
But to this day, there are still lingering questions in Selmer about whether justice was served in her case.
I believe that she actually got away with murder of her husband. Justice was not served, in my opinion.
Was Mary Winkler a victim or a villain?
Both.
Did Mary get away with murder?
Yes, she did.
She's going to have to answer for what she did. It's not up to me to forgive her. What she did is between her and Matthew and his family and God.
As for Matthew's parents, this tragedy that befell their son is still painfully close to their hearts.
His father, Dan, can be seen giving a sermon in this Palm Beach Lakes Church of Christ video, posted on YouTube just last month.
18 years ago, trauma knocked on the front door of our house, and we lost a son. I live with that emptiness all of the time. It's been almost 2 decades, but I remember the sound of his voice. And every time we sit down at a Christmas table as a family, there's an empty place.
Tonight, I go back home to Georgia to look into the death of a young wife.
That Atlanta wife murdered as she opened her very own front door. An all-new 2020 starts right now.
This is a true murder mystery. Emphasis on murder, emphasis on mystery.
I felt like Lita's murder case looks like a true crime story, but it goes a lot deeper.
Who would kill this woman? She wasn't robbed. Somebody came to the door with roses and shot her dead.
Was there a feeling that this had to be pretty calculated?
She was shot with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun.
No obvious suspect.
Was she at all concerned about the fact that she was in an interracial marriage and that this was a difficult time in the South?
It was not a welcoming place for a black woman to live.
She said, I'm done. I'm packing up my stuff.
I want you to see the puzzle. When I put it together and I show it to you, you'll never forget it.
Your wife's best friend has been murdered, and police are looking at you. It's a chilly, drizzly winter Atlanta morning, and 35-year-old Lita McClinton is suddenly awakened.
It's around 8:15 in the morning, and she heard the doorbell ring. And she tightens up her rope and goes downstairs to open the door.
And I think she was probably not going to open it, but she looked through the keyhole and saw that the person had a box of flowers.
There was a man standing at the door, holding a long white box of long stem roses that had a big, thick pink ribbon around it.
So she receives the flowers, thinking that this is a delivery.
She was really excited. She thought that it was a gift from one of her friends.
In a sea of red brick townhouses, Lita's white one stands out. Her best friend Poppy and 3-year-old daughter have spent the night, and they are still in bed upstairs, just waking up.
Poppy hears her say, "Good morning," to the man at the door.
The flower delivery man produces a handgun. He fires a shot.
She actually put the box of roses in front of her face. The second shot went right through the center of her head, and she fell with a large thud.
Lita's friend Poppy was upstairs with her toddler. Right away, she grabbed her daughter and hid her into a closet and said, "You gotta be quiet as a mouse." She didn't know if the gunman was gonna come for her. Lita's neighbor hears the shots, then sees the guy running like a bat out of hell, just booking it out of the complex, and he calls 911.
The first police officer is only a few blocks away, and he gets the call, and so that police officer ends up holding Lita's hand. They thought Lita was completely unconscious, and yet she managed to squeeze his hand as he kept comforting her and telling her everything was going to be okay. And he said it was her comforting him. Poppy got out of the closet and called Lita's mother, and she couldn't get words out, and she finally just said, "Lita's been shot." Lita's mother called her husband. When they went to the hospital, they were put in a separate little waiting room. The doctor tended to Lita, and he came out about 30 minutes later and said, "I'm sorry."
It's gone. We should have gone first, not her.
Atlanta's exclusive Buckhead neighborhood is known for its sprawling mansions, not murder. So when the shooting happened right here, neighbors were shocked and on edge.
Sullivan was found in the doorway of her townhouse, shot twice in the head.
It's pretty surprising that in this area, those kinds of things probably wouldn't happen.
How did you learn that Lita had been killed?
I ran to the TV because I heard Sullivan on Slayton Drive.
Police say a box of roses was found near her body. The gunman apparently posed as a delivery man.
And I said, "Oh my God, that's Lita."
Detectives on the scene found a bullet fragment, 2 shell casings, and the box of roses.
2 gunshots from a 9mm penetrated the box. The weapon was never found. To this day, it's never been found.
In this case, you had just a minor amount of evidence.
At the time, it was the top story on the news, and law enforcement officers felt a great deal of pressure in order to bring Lita's killer to justice.
For years, Lita's case was cold, buried underneath the weight of unanswered questions and fading memories.
I'm Deb Miller-Landau, and I just wrote a book called A Devil Went Down to Georgia about the murder of Lita McClinton Sullivan. I covered this story for Atlanta Magazine back in 2004, and the more people I talked to, the more that I researched, the more I felt like I began to know Lita. So talking about the day that she died feels personal.
The case was also personal to Clint Rucker, the prosecutor. When I came to Atlanta to meet up with him, I learned that one of his passions is puzzles, working from the outside in, which also translates to solving homicides. Where do you begin? How do you start to connect?
When I'm putting together a puzzle, not only in real life, but also a murder case, I make an assessment about what it is I'm working with. I start to identify pieces of the puzzle that are foundational.
Lita's murder case looks like a true crime story, but it goes a lot deeper. It's a story about love and loss and greed.
Lita had been reared in Atlanta's black elite.
On the surface, she was living an Atlanta dream.
A prosperous upbringing.
A very prosperous upbringing. The expectations for her life were pretty high.
Black women have had to be exceptional in order to be seen. And that was the case then, and I think it's still the case now.
One thing seems certain, a murder of this kind is personal.
Was there a feeling that this had to be pretty calculated?
Police knew almost immediately Lita Sullivan was the intended victim.
Who would kill this woman? She wasn't robbed. Somebody came to the door with roses and shot her dead.
Atlanta had its fair share of crime, but this was most certainly one of the highest profile cases that got reported in the news.
Sullivan was shot twice in the head. A box of roses found next to her body.
Using a flower delivery man and shooting her, it was something that just kind of stuck out to me.
Atlanta, Georgia, billed as a vibrant melting pot, a destination for creatives. But if you grew up in Georgia in the 1970s, as I did, you know this was a very different place then. One still emerging from the dark shadows of segregation and racial tensions. What was 1970s Atlanta like when she was sort of coming along?
We've got African Americans that are kind of ascending into really prominent positions. Lita also is ascending because her parents are part of this movement.
Lita's parents, Emory and Joanne McClinton, were both power players, movers and shakers in Atlanta.
Emory McClinton was on the State Board of Transportation. Joanne McClinton was a member of the Georgia legislature.
Joanne will tell you stories about being in really interpersonal meetings with Dr. King.
She was the Maynard Jackson's campaign manager when he ran for mayor.
I think the McClintons had high expectations for who Lita would become. Lita Sullivan was a true daughter of Atlanta.
She was just a gem, very, very proper.
And she had grown up in a world of cotillions, so she really was sort of that classic upper crust black person growing up in Atlanta.
She knew where she was going.
She had a great sense of style.
And absolutely charming.
After high school, she went on to Spelman College. Her parents sort of hoped that she would enter the political arena like they were, but she was very much into fashion. She was working at a boutique at Lenox Square, and in walks this guy who had unruly curls and weird glasses and just immediately saw Lita and was taken with her.
Fresh out of college, 24-year-old Lita is smitten with Jim Sullivan. He's a bit older, 35, and he's also white.
He showered her with gifts. He just completely showered her with attention.
He comes in, he dazzles her. What did you learn about him?
I learned that what he saw was a fantasy in Lita. I think he looked at her as a young, very attractive, very smart African-American female.
Another big difference between them is class. Lita has been raised in Atlanta's high society and Jim on Boston's gritty South Side.
He grew up in a very middle to lower middle class environment.
He went to Holy Cross College, got a bachelor's degree in economics.
He always wanted more for himself. He always wanted to be a rich person, but it didn't seem like that was in the cards. He was an accountant. He was working hard, but he really wasn't getting ahead.
But life is about to change for Jim Sullivan when he inherits a thriving liquor distributorship from his uncle, worth millions of dollars.
Crown Beverages was worth around $3.2 million. Jim had become a wealthy man. So when the McClintons met Jim for the first time, they were like, who is this guy? He had this kind of manner that was very uncouth and brash, and they were sort of mystified about what their daughter saw in him. I mean, I think the only thing they had in common was that he was Catholic and they were Catholic as well. But everything else was complete polar opposites.
Another concern, of course, was race. Remember, this is the 70s. Even though the country is watching color barriers slipping away on the hit show The Jeffersons, with Primetime's first interracial couple.
Your parents have never gotten over the fact that I'm white.
That's because you never got over being white.
At that time, this was unusual.
Georgia's anti-miscegenation laws that forbade blacks and whites to marry had only been repealed 10 years earlier.
Still, despite their obvious differences, Jim Sullivan pops the question to Lita.
So the McClintons were like, you cannot marry this man.
They felt like Lita was really making a mistake and was kind of caught up in the exuberance of this relationship.
Despite her parents' strong objections, Lita and Jim are engaged. But on the eve of her wedding, Jim drops a bomb.
He tells Lita that he has been married before and that he has 4 children. Lita was shocked.
And then, the very same night, Jim Sullivan blindsides his bride-to-be again.
He whips out a piece of paper and he says, "Can you sign this?" And then she looks down and sees that he's drawn up a prenuptial agreement. And she's like, "What is this?"
Apparently determined to protect his newfound wealth, Sullivan surprises Lita with a prenup, which says that in the event of a divorce, she would walk away with virtually nothing. She's reluctant, but the cake is ordered, the flowers are ready, so Lita signs the agreement and ties the knot anyway.
Lita got married in 1976. It was a small ceremony in Macon, Georgia. Joanne McClinton would later describe that as the worst day of her life.
The newlyweds settle some 80 miles south of Atlanta near Jim's business in Macon. It's a world away from Atlanta. But Lita agrees to give up her current job and her income and become full-time Mrs. Jim Sullivan.
They bought a house in Shirley Hills, a very affluent, very white part of Macon. Joanne and Emery McClinton feared for their daughter. Being part of an interracial couple in Macon, Georgia in the 1970s would have been extraordinarily challenging. The neighbors were like, "You have the gall to bring a black wife to Shirley Hills." People threw garbage on their doorstep.
The out-and-out racism had to be tough for Lita. But she moves forward and makes some new connections and friends, including Yvette Miller.
When Lita and Yvette occasionally go out to eat, she notices something a bit curious.
We'd go out to lunch at a nice restaurant, and she couldn't pay the bill. And I would end up picking up the check.
And they were a wealthy couple.
They were very wealthy.
Then one Christmas season, a card arrives in the mail addressed to Jim. Lita opens it, and what she discovers will make her question everything. Lita and Jim Sullivan's first few months of marriage seemed to be going well.
They were both intelligent, both attractive, definitely upper class, high society.
But just beneath the surface, there's some obvious cracks.
They seemed to be loving at first.
At first?
He was not that nice to her, and he was not that kind to her.
Was he brusque? Was he brash?
He was a bit arrogant. Even though he had all of these resources, he did not, in my opinion, take care of his wife.
Friends say that the once generous millionaire has suddenly become a miser.
He was notoriously cheap.
He would wear his dead uncle's clothes around the house. He would use the sheath from the dry cleaning as saran wrap in the kitchen. He didn't want Lita to work, but he kept her on a very tight allowance where he gave her $150 a week.
Did she express any discontentment with her marriage?
When we were at those restaurants, Jim just does not give me enough money to take care of me and the house. You know, she clearly was not happy.
Was there talk of infidelity?
Lita had several instances where she questioned whether or not her husband was actually having an affair.
One day she finds a long blonde hair in their master bathroom, and she asks Jim about it, and he says, "I don't know what you're talking about." They got into this cycle of, she accused him of philandering. He would deny it, and then he would buy her sort of an expensive jewelry apology.
Then, during the holidays one year, Lita makes another stunning discovery.
A Christmas card came addressed to Jim. She opened it. A woman wrote in something like, "Missing your kisses." The woman's return address was on the envelope, so Lita went and spoke to her. And the woman said that she had been having an affair with Jim.
Lita is distraught and goes home to be with her parents in Atlanta. But her husband manages to lure her back, increasing her weekly allowance in a now post-nuptial agreement.
Now it's $300 instead of $150 a week, but it still shows that all of their assets belong to Jim.
That's right, the successful business, Lita's Mercedes, multiple properties, even her jewelry, still belonged to her husband in the event of a divorce.
But in an attempt at reconciliation, Lita signs the postnup.
Just a few months after Lita signs that agreement, without Lita knowing, Sullivan decides to sell Crown Beverages for $5 million.
And that's not all. He tells her they're moving to Palm Beach, Florida.
Lita was in shock.
She had any clue that he was going to whistle her down to Palm Beach.
But Lita's new Florida home, located a stone's throw from what would become Mar-a-Lago, is more elaborate than she ever would have imagined. Called Casa Alita. It's a 17,000 square foot mansion with 8 oceanfront bedrooms.
It was just unbelievable.
When you went to Jim's home, you go through this tunnel and you would be at the beach. It's your own private beach.
But for Lita, everything that glitters isn't exactly gold.
James Sullivan very much wanted to integrate himself into the upper echelons of society, and his aspirations did not include Lita's participation.
It was not a welcoming place for a black woman to live. And when he found out that to sort of scale the level of social plateau he was looking at in Palm Beach, having a black wife was a serious impediment to that.
She was left out of some affairs, and she really became upset.
So even though they had money, this is a moneyed crowd, didn't really matter though.
He was barely rich compared to Palm Beach.
Did he want to be in that crowd?
Oh, yes. He wanted to, be accepted as one of the rich and famous.
It doesn't take long before Jim starts to flirt with other women.
And it's at a cocktail party that one particularly elegant Palm Beach woman catches Sullivan's eye.
Jim sees Suki Rogers, who is a Korean-born socialite.
She was telegenic. She had a spicy personality. I think a man like Jim Sullivan could not help but be intrigued by this beautiful woman.
They started dating. He's still married to Lita.
By now, the Sullivans have been married nearly 10 years, but things are about to explode.
Lita finds women's lingerie in their master bed. It's the bra that broke the camel's back.
She said, I'm done. I'm packing up my stuff, and I'm going back home.
Lita arrives back in Atlanta. The very next day, she files for divorce from Jim.
But Sullivan fights Lita every step of the way, and the divorce drags on.
Did she seem concerned, worried, nervous about her breakup?
What I detected was she was excited, and she was cutting the cord and leaving Jim alone. She wanted her life back.
While Lita is looking forward to a new life of freedom, she can't be happy about the prospect of leaving her marriage with virtually nothing. No career, no Palm Beach mansion, no Buckhead townhouse, and $2,500 a month in alimony for 3 years. So Lita is going to divorce court, determined to fight for what she believes she deserves.
All she wanted was a reasonable financial settlement so that she could kind of go on with her life.
January 16th, 1987 was set up to be a pivotal day in the lives of Lita and Jim Sullivan.
A judge was going to decide whether or not to throw out the post-nuptial agreement.
She might get as much as close to $1 million in cash and assets.
The morning of January 16th, Lita Sullivan, she'd lose her life that day in a murder.
With Lita out of the picture, Jim Sullivan stands to gain the property that they had and retain control over all his money.
Sullivan was the main suspect.
That is, until a treasure trove of secret recordings of Lita's private conversations are uncovered. taking this investigation in a whole new direction.
And police are looking at you.
You know, you make a big circle and you put everybody in it that's close to Lita. Everybody's a suspect. But the first one would be the husband.
The first and obvious suspect was James Sullivan, who stood to gain everything from her death, all the property, all the monies, and who was contesting the divorce.
Detectives went down to speak to him in Palm Beach, and they put him through a polygraph.
Jim Sullivan not only passes the polygraph, but there's something else. He has an alibi that puts him nearly 700 miles away from the crime scene.
James Sullivan was actually in Palm Beach at the time of Lita's murder.
When you first look at it, it looks pretty cut and dry. When you interview all the people involved, everybody points in one direction, towards the husband. But when you sit down and look at the facts, I'm not so sure that the husband is the person that committed the crime.
Nothing surfaced in the early stages of the investigation that implicated Jim Sullivan in the murder.
Sullivan is cooperating with authorities, and during his interview with detectives, he mentions the name of his friend, Marvin Marable.
At the time of Lita's death, Marvin and James Sullivan had a very close relationship.
Remember, Marvin Marable is married to Lita's best friend, Poppy, who was in the Buckhead townhouse with her 3-year-old daughter the morning that Lita was murdered. But back before the shooting, the friendship hadn't always sat well with Marvin.
When Lita moved back to Atlanta, they started, hanging out together.
So she's disillusioned by her relationship. Did her failed relationship have any impact on your relationship?
Well, from the standpoint of them, being together all the time and going out, yeah.
Commiserating.
Oh, absolutely. Certainly didn't help. And I can understand her being there for her friend, but, sometimes you can go overboard, which is what happened in our relationship.
Marable, a former New York State trooper turned entrepreneur, says Lita would often spend hours at his home with Poppy. And it was during this time, he says, coincidentally or not, that his own marriage began to unravel.
I found a letter where Poppy was planning to file for divorce.
So she was planning to file for divorce without your knowledge?
Oh, yeah.
That had to be a shocker.
It was.
So then you decided to try something a little questionable after that.
I have a background in law enforcement. I don't see it as questionable. It's your own telephone in your own house. I put a recorder on the, people call it a tap, on the phone, and I started recording conversations.
In the house phone?
Mm-hmm. On the house phone.
He began listening to Poppy and Lita's conversations and ended up recording more than 300 hours.
In doing those very personal conversations between girlfriends, Marvin Marable learns that there may be some information that James Sullivan might be interested in learning that will be helpful for him in his divorce case.
He tells Sullivan about the tapes and what's on them, specifically Lita's post-divorce plans.
And soon enough, the two disgruntled husbands are conspiring to get the best of their soon-to-be ex-wives in divorce court.
Marvin Marable travels down to Palm Beach under a false name, and the two men listen to the tapes, and Marvin says, I'm not going to record anymore, and Jim says, no, keep recording.
Was there talk of money?
Yeah, he offered $30,000.
Jim says to Marvin, if the judge decides to honor the postnuptial agreement, he's going to give Marvin $30,000 for the use of the information on the tapes.
What kinds of things did Lita talk about that could be helpful to either one of you?
There were some guys that, she would talk to, but she was legally separated.
But then, just a few days after Marvin and Jim's secret meeting at Casa Elita,
Poppy and Lita somehow discovered the recording device.
How did they react?
It wasn't nice. She filed for divorce the next day.
She was angry.
She was very angry.
Lita was upset too, so upset that she reported Marvin to the authorities, and he was charged with possession of an eavesdropping device. So when police questioned Sullivan about who might have a motive to murder his wife, he tells them to look no further than Marvin Marable.
And sure enough, only a few days after Lita's death, Marvin is being questioned by the Atlanta Police Department about Lita's murder.
I go down for the interview, and the first thing they did is read me my rights. And from there on, it was just a nightmare. I was a prime suspect.
You have a law enforcement background, so you knew
Right.
what police
So
were.
I knew that I was being followed. I could pick the investigators, police, could pick them out all the time. Jim had mentioned my name to them. He said, look at Marvin Merrill.
This was serious stuff.
Oh, yeah.
How worried were you?
I was very worried.
Joanna and Emery McClinton were beyond devastated. Their eldest daughter was dead. Just 3 days after Lita's murder, they held a funeral.
Days dissolve into months, and authorities are no closer to finding Lita Sullivan's murderer.
The case is just sort of growing colder and colder by the minute.
And while Marvin Marable might have been angry at Lita for pressing those charges against him for eavesdropping, there was no evidence he was responsible for her death.
I know that people get wrongly accused, wrongly convicted, and so the only saving grace is the fact that I knew I was innocent.
By process of elimination is you can determine the pieces that don't fit.
And just eliminate them.
The way in which we eliminated Marvin Marable as a suspect, there was just not enough to connect him directly to the crime itself.
As for that eavesdropping device charge, Marvin was put on probation, which he completed, and then he was exonerated. But on those recordings Marable made, Lita had talked about other men, something that her soon-to-be ex-husband Sullivan pointed out to police.
He made allegations that she was participating in extramarital affairs, and that perhaps this was the action of, you know, a disgruntled boyfriend.
We have a lot of major players. At this point in the investigation, we have a lot of suspects.
One of the first men police question is a professional athlete.
Lita and him had been friends when she was in Palm Beach. The police quickly found out that he was in prison for drug possession.
That athlete is behind bars when Lita is killed, so clearly he can't be the trigger man. Then investigators turn their sights to a prominent Atlanta businessman.
And he and Lita had been childhood friends, and they sort of rekindled their friendship. And they realized that he had no motive, and they found nothing that connected him.
Authorities also take a hard look at another suitor who had taken Lita to dinner the night before her death. And get this, had also given her 2 roses.
The suspect was a man named Bob Daniel, and Bob had had an incident a couple months before the murder where, in a drunken rage, he came to Lita's house, smashed his car into the garage, and as the cops were taking him away, he said, "I'm gonna kill that." So, serious red flag.
But that lead didn't go anywhere either.
Bob had just had quadruple bypass surgery. You know, the police ultimately decided that Bob had nothing to do with it.
It's the unknowing that makes it so difficult. And to know that there are individuals who may be walking around now planning and plotting to do the same thing to somebody else is abhorrent to me.
I remember having the impression it was like a festering wound for them.
The McClintons want to draw attention to a $25,000 reward in the case.
The cause of finding justice for Lita became their obsession, became their passion.
The reward is for the arrest and conviction of those individuals responsible for our daughter's murder.
To catch Lita's killer, the Atlanta Police Department assigns 2 veteran detectives to the case.
If Lieutenant Walker bears a resemblance to actor Billy D. Williams, Welcome Harris reminds one of Columbo, the dogged, disheveled detective of television fame.
Building a murder case was like making a mosaic. You know, you get a shiny piece of glass here, a gem there. You put it together and you hope that from it emerges the shimmering image of a killer.
This particular case deals with what I consider to be high society. It contains a little bit of everything. Intrigue, mystery.
These days, a lot of murders are solved using DNA technology, ring camera technology. But back then, it was detective work.
She was shot with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun.
Most important thing found at the crime scene was the roses.
They canvassed all the area flower shops and quickly found that the roses had been purchased at the Botany Bay flower shop.
They interviewed the worker in there, and he told them that this guy came in about 8 o'clock and bought these roses and paid in cash and then left. And he was in a small car.
The florist gave a description of the man buying the flowers and another man who was waiting in the car.
So detectives know they're looking for at least 2 men.
Until yet another person is described to police, that flower delivery man who had looked Lita's neighbor right in the eye.
There was a next-door neighbor of Lita's, lived over on the right side of her condo. He lived there. His name was Bob Christensen.
He actually gave a description of the flower delivery man as a Caucasian, middle-aged man.
They went down to the police station and worked with a police artist and got sketches. As the sketches were being completed, the officers were realizing, obviously, that the shooter was not Jim Sullivan and that the other individuals were all 3 distinct individuals. They didn't look anything like each other, so therefore we knew 3 people were involved.
For investigators, this has all the earmarks of only one thing: murder for hire.
All the evidence pointed to a hitman showing up at the front door, posing as a flower delivery man, and firing a gunshot into Lita's head.
With investigators now exploring the possibility that Lita was murdered by a hired gunman, another critical piece of evidence comes to light: a mysterious phone call.
And what they found was that on the same day that Lita was murdered, about an hour after the actual shooting, there was a collect phone call that was placed from a payphone right outside of Atlanta, Georgia.
Was this a call from the killer?
I don't know about you. I haven't had a collect call from a payphone. So as a cop, you probably go, I wonder if that's connected.
And a tip from a woman 700 miles away may just be the big break investigators have been waiting for.
I said, anyone knows that if you wanted to get a woman to answer the door, all you would have to do is take flowers to the door.
This was a huge puzzle of a case.
A hitman showing up at the front door, posing as a flower delivery man, firing a gunshot into Lita's head.
How did your puzzle-solving skills come into play?
You figure out what fits and what doesn't fit.
I want everyone listening to this to know that I am absolutely innocent.
The loss of a daughter.
They still don't have a murder weapon.
But they do have witnesses.
Do you know anybody who can possibly take care of my problem for me? Because I need some help here.
Anyone knows that if you wanted to get a woman to answer the door, all you would have to do is take flowers to the door.
She suggested the flowers.
She suggested the flowers.
You actually brought in a doorbell. Why?
To have that sense of what Lita Sullivan experienced right before her murder. She's about to meet her maker.
It's a deadly delivery of a dozen pink roses. 35-year-old Lita McClinton Sullivan opens her front door and is suddenly gunned down.
On the year anniversary of Lita's death, there are no named suspects. They still don't have a murder weapon. They don't have a hitman. They don't have a paper trail that ties Jim or anyone else to a hit.
But that's about to change when they get Jim Sullivan's phone records.
On the same day that Lita was murdered, about an hour or so after the actual shooting, there was a collect phone call to James Sullivan's home in Palm Beach, Florida.
It turns out to be from a rest stop in Suwanee, Georgia, maybe 30 or 40 miles from Buckhead. Using a phone call to call another state, that opens up federal jurisdiction. In this case, that's the FBI.
We believed the phone call from Suwanee rest stop to his home in Palm Beach, Florida, was sufficient indication that a contract hitter may have called him after doing the job.
Enter Special Agent John Kingston, who takes a particular interest in that phone call and a whole slew of other calls Jim Sullivan made and received around the time of Lita's murder.
I got a whole year's worth, 6 months before the murder to 6 months after the murder.
Kingston notices a few calls, and one of them was to Bob Christensen, Lita's neighbor. When Kingston talks to Bob, he finds out that Jim had called Bob 3 days before the murder.
Sullivan said, had he seen anything suspicious around Lita's townhouse?
And Bob finds it strange. He hasn't talked to Jim in over a year.
Bob Christensen shares something else with Agent Kingston. On the same day Jim Sullivan called him, 3 days before the fatal flower delivery, Lita heard a loud knock on her door at 5 or 6 in the morning. It was so early and so unnerving, she didn't answer it.
So that made the call that he got from Jim even more suspicious.
Kingston also finds that a call is made between Jim's house and a Howard Johnson's motel in Atlanta, just a couple of miles from Lita's house. This is really strange. One thing that he's learned about Jim is that he's not a Hojo's kind of guy. So he goes to the Howard Johnsons and asks if he can look through the records.
They gave me the shoebox with all the registration cards, and I pick out 3 that I thought, well, these are awfully interesting. So I said, do you guys have the phone records? They said, yeah, sure we do. And I'm thinking, boy, these people keep really good records, and they keep them for a long time, and I'm really glad. They bring me the phone records for January 13th. I'm flipping through them, and all of a sudden I see 305 Palm Beach, South Florida area code. And I'm pretty sure it's Jim's number. And so I check my records real quick, and I go, yep, that's his number. And then I look, and I said, oh, look, it's from 518. That's one of the 3 cards I pulled out. Well, it just so happens I have a copy of it here. And one of the things it imparts is 3 individuals checked into the room. The individual who actually registered used the name Johnny Furr, but 3 individuals is important to me because I think 3 people involved in the crime. They put their car down as a Toyota 85 with a North Carolina plate. We believe that a Toyota was the getaway car for the murder. So there's 2 coincidences already.
But remember, these motel records are from January 13th. Lita was murdered 3 days later on the 16th. Special Agent Kingston is beginning to surmise that the killers may have tried and failed to get to her once before.
What I believe it to be is the killers having come down 3 days before the actual murder was committed, knocking on her door, her not answering it, and them having to stop and regroup and figure out what plan B is going to be. So I am in love with this registration card and becomes the focal point of my life for the next several months.
Kingston's next move is to locate this so-called Johnny Fur with the North Carolina license plate.
And to my surprise, there are 150 John or Johnny Furs in North Carolina. But to my great surprise, 115 of these 150 are in a very small circle in North Carolina between the three cities of Albemarle, Concord, and Kannapolis.
They're going to knock on every door and find this Johnny Fur. Of course, they're coming from Georgia, and anytime the FBI goes and investigates in another state, they need that state's approval. And just as they're about to get to the state border, their boss calls them and says, North Carolina's denying you entry, and they'll take it from here.
And that pretty much kills my case. that kills my case.
Yeah, soon after that, Agent Kingston is transferred to another job, and that whole investigation just sort of fades away. Meantime, in Palm Beach, Jim and Suki are living the high life. So with Lita out of the picture, Jim is free to marry Suki, which he does 8 months after Lita's murder.
He's thinking that he's the cat's meow. Eating in restaurants in Palm Beach, going to parties, got another attractive woman on his arm.
Jim drives around town in a Rolls Royce and gets into a fender bender and has to go to traffic court. Jim says to the judge, well, you've misunderstood. I wasn't even driving that day. Suki was driving. So the judge says, we're going to throw it out. However, the cop who was on the scene catches wind, and he says Suki wasn't even in the car that day. It was Jim driving alone. So now Jim has perjured himself, as has Suki.
Jim ultimately got convicted of perjury, was given a year probation and a year of home confinement.
Suki Sullivan also receives a year of probation.
Suki's freaking out. When she gets charged with perjury on his behalf, she's like, I'm done with this. Suki files for divorce from Jim. And the trial that follows is the juiciest, craziest gossip in town. So when it's Suki's turn to testify, she drops a bomb.
Did he talk to you about his former wife, Lita?
Yes.
Tell me what it was he said to you about Lita.
You can hear a pin drop. It's a big moment. After 33 months of marriage, Suki files for divorce from Jim.
Not surprisingly, it's another disputed divorce. But what might have been typical testimony about alimony takes a sudden turn in court.
Tell me what it was he said to you about Lita.
He hired someone to get rid of her.
I'm sorry?
He hired someone to get rid of her.
She claimed that he confessed to her that he had Lita killed.
This became a bombshell in the investigation of the murder of Lita Sullivan.
Suki Sullivan's divorce testimony may be big news for the FBI, but it has zero impact on the divorce judgment, which favors her husband, Jim Sullivan, in nearly every way.
His divorce was complete, but his life for turmoil was just beginning.
The opulent ocean-facing Palm Beach Palace may look like something out of The Great Gatsby, but while we watched, a new chapter in a crime story was unfolding.
We develop information here at WSB. There's going to be a raid on Jim Sullivan's Palm Beach mansion, and that is the biggest break in the Lita Sullivan case since the murder itself.
Investigators from the FBI, Atlanta Police, and the Georgia Bureau of Investigation were on the grounds of a mansion identified as that of James Sullivan.
All of a sudden, Jim Sullivan is clearly in the crosshairs of federal authorities.
They got a tip that Jim, now a convicted felon, has guns in the house. Of course, you're not allowed to have guns if you're a convicted felon. So they put together a sweeping affidavit to get a search warrant.
We did see a number of guns loaded into a car and this box carried out.
When they found the guns, he was in violation of his probation, and so he went to jail for 9 months.
All this time, a federal grand jury has been convening in Atlanta.
They've got what they found in the mansion. They got what they found in the phone records. They've got Lita Sullivan. They've got the neighbors. What they don't have are the identities of the hit team. There's a problem, though.
We, the federal government, have a 5-year statute of limitations, which is going to be up on January 16th of '92.
With 5 or 6 days to go before it expired, the U.S. attorney made a bold decision. We're going to take our best shot with what we got right now, so they indict Jim Sullivan.
Jim Sullivan is indicted on multiple counts of arranging Lita's murder for hire through interstate phone calls.
Millionaire James V. Sullivan is on trial in connection with an alleged murder for hire plot. Here he arrives for the first day of trial testimony.
It was a trial that transfixed Atlanta. I mean, it was something we were covering on basically a daily basis, but we couldn't have it on camera because it's federal court.
It looks like the family is finally going to have some accountability for the murder of their daughter, Lita.
The prosecution suggests the killers were calling Sullivan from the rest stop to say the job was done. The defense suggests otherwise.
Jim Sullivan is lawyered up with the best criminal defense lawyers that you can find anywhere in Atlanta and maybe in the whole country.
There is no evidence at this point in this case who placed that call, or whether that call was placed by anyone connected with the crime.
The prosecutor spent 2 weeks telling their side of the story.
Suki, the woman he married months after Lita's death, delivered some of the most dramatic testimony the jury has heard.
They build what they feel like is a really strong case.
And then a big bombshell hits.
The judge says, I'm forced to dismiss this case for lack of evidence.
Judge Marvin Shube ruled that, in effect, even if Sullivan may have been involved in the murder for hire, the government fell short in proving the phone calls related to the murder.
Well, this is one of the most difficult decisions I had to make because I firmly believe in the jury system.
And then he looks at Jim and he says, you've been acquitted.
This was ultra shocking.
Suddenly it's over, and Jim is a free man.
I want everyone listening to this to know that I am absolutely innocent. I had nothing to do with Lita's death. Her death was a great tragedy, and I thank God and my attorneys that this ordeal is over.
The family at that point, I guess, is just sort of at a loss. How devastating was that for them?
They felt like the justice system had let them down.
I was not expecting this. It's extremely difficult.
The system today is weighed in the favor of the defense.
James Sullivan seems to have gotten away with murder.
But Lita's parents aren't giving up.
They file a wrongful death suit in Palm Beach, Florida, and they win.
We, the jury, return the following verdict.
The jury deems that Jim is guilty of wrongful death.
Total damages of the estate of Lita McClinton Sullivan, $4 million.
But Sullivan is able to hide his assets and not pay any of the civil judgment.
Jim Sullivan appealed their civil judgment, and he won by having the Florida court say that they had filed it after the Florida statute of limitations.
Once again, Jim has wiggled out of any responsibility, and the family is left dumbfounded.
Until
a call is received out of the blue.
A young woman comes forward. It proved to be the break in the case that everyone was looking for.
11 years have gone by since Lita Sullivan was gunned down on her doorstep when a tip comes in from a town 700 miles away.
A call is received out of the blue, and the individual calling is an attorney in Beaumont, Texas. He has a receptionist whose name is Belinda Trahan, who has told him a very unusual story about her boyfriend, Tony Harwood.
Belinda and Tony lived together in Albemarle, North Carolina. And he was a long-distance truck driver for North American Van Lines.
He basically drove a moving truck.
Belinda tells her boss about a time that Tony came home from a long-haul trucking trip and said that a rich white man in Florida offered to pay him to, quote, take care of his black wife in Georgia. At the time, Belinda didn't believe it. She thought he must be cheating on her.
Belinda thought that it was Tony just trying to get out of town and go down to Atlanta to the strip bars.
Until he took her to meet this rich white guy in a diner somewhere, and he got a wad full of money.
She says he sits down briefly in their booth and gives Tony Harwood the balance owed for the hit on the man's wife.
Belinda Trahan tells her boss that soon after this bizarre trip, she broke up with Tony Harwood and moved to Texas. But now, 11 years later, she says that he mysteriously reached out to her again, asking her to meet him at a nearby truck stop.
She's afraid that he may commit harm to her.
And it's this new tip from Belinda Trahan that sends Georgia authorities to the Lone Star State, turning up the heat on an otherwise cold case.
Georgia Bureau of Investigator Agent John Lang takes a detective from the Atlanta Police Department and goes down to Texas to talk to Belinda.
She was with Tony when they met this mysterious man at this diner that they were meeting at. We wanted to show her a lineup of pictures in hopes that she could pick Sullivan out of it.
And she takes her pink fingernail and taps right on Jim Sullivan's face and says, "This is the man."
My plan of attack was to get some recordings with her and Tony. So we got her to get in touch with Tony again.
She's talking to him and trying to coax information out of him, knowing John Lang is listening on her end. And Tony gives enough information that places him at the scene at the time.
We had the phone calls with Tony. She picked Jim Sullivan out of the lineup, but there was still more investigation to do. We really didn't know who Tony Harwood was.
John Lang knows that Tony worked at North American Van Lines. So he calls up North American Van Lines and he says, "Hey, you don't happen to have your records from 11 years ago?" And the guy says, "Yeah, there's some boxes full of files up in a musty attic. You're more than welcome to go poke around."
We went up into a hot attic and opened the first box that I went through. And about the third document I looked at was Jim Sullivan. His address was on it, Palm Beach, Florida. His signature was on it, and Tony Harwood's signature was on it.
He finds a bill of lading showing that Tony Harwood moved furniture for Jim Sullivan 2 months before the murder. And it's the paper trail he needs. It's like the jackpot.
Astounding. I don't know any other way to explain it. I mean, open this box and like the third record I look at, here it is. I mean, it just like it was meant to be.
On a Sunday morning in April of 1998, John Lang and local authorities go knock on Tony's door in Albemarle, North Carolina. Tony answers the door.
And he said, "You know, I've been waiting on you boys for a long time."
They take Tony to the Albemarle police station. Lang interviews Tony for 3 hours in this tiny room. But at the end of the day, Tony admits to taking money from Jim, $25,000, to take care of Lita. He also tells the detectives that he wasn't the one to pull the trigger, but that he was there the day of the murder.
He went through the whole case. And throughout the interview, he incriminated himself even more. I mean, admitted that he was there. He knew what happened. So he was arrested for murder of Lita Sullivan. And we took him back to Atlanta that day.
After Tony's arrest, things moved pretty quickly.
We are here today to announce the issuance of a warrant for the arrest of James V. Sullivan.
They got enough to get Sullivan. And now, boom, Sullivan hears of this and blows. He takes off.
We have reason to believe that he's outside the country.
He's just gone, vanished.
Investigators say he could be anywhere.
He is nowhere to be found.
We certainly do not know where Mr. Sullivan is. We have reason to believe that he's outside the country.
More than a decade after his wife Lita was murdered, Jim Sullivan seems to be playing a game of catch me if you can with authorities.
There is an international manhunt for James Sullivan.
Well, Jim had moved to Costa Rica, actually bought a home there. In 1998, after an arrest warrant was issued for him, he immediately, like that night, went to Panama.
If you have any information concerning James Sullivan, you should contact the nearest U.S. Embassy or consulate.
We didn't know exactly where he had flown from Panama, and we didn't know exactly where he had gone.
His trail goes cold.
They put him on Interpol, and it was just cold.
They've tapped phone lines, anybody that he might have called, and he's called no one, not even his mother.
There was a few tips that came in. The tips are just dead ends.
The McClintons, they're dumbfounded that this guy could, get away again.
But in late 1999, with Sullivan still completely off the grid, the heartbroken Emery and Joanne McClinton do get some good news.
Last week came this, a court decision reinstating a $4 million judgment against Jim Sullivan in connection with a wrongful death case brought in effect by Lita's estate.
Lita's family and law enforcement officials hope that a renewed hunt for Sullivan's money will help smoke him out.
Where you find Sullivan's money, you're going to find him close by.
But even this goes nowhere.
Fast forward to 2002. There is no sign of Jim Sullivan.
We tried every effort in our arsenal to try and locate him, to put him on the FBI's wanted list, but to also put him on the top 10 list, which is very unusual. You don't get on the top 10 list very easily. Then we also featured him on America's Most Wanted.
The most recent picture we have of Sullivan is at least 5 years old, so the FBI age-enhanced this photo, which may bear a closer resemblance to Sullivan's appearance today. If you recognize James Sullivan from either of these photographs, call us now at 1-800-CRIME-TV.
A man sees America's Most Wanted on television and goes, I know that guy. He lives in my condo complex in Chiang, Thailand. And sure enough, he calls the authorities.
He went to Panama, to Venezuela, and eventually to Thailand, where he got a beachfront condo.
He spends his days walking on the beach, sitting by the pool, occasionally playing tennis, as though no other troubles in the world. The Thai police knock on Jim Sullivan's door on July 2nd, 2002, and say, you're under arrest. The McClintons can hardly believe it.
We found out from the FBI, and that was a moment of jubilation.
15 years is a long time to concentrate on the loss of a daughter. And we had determination, and we had the will, but we also had all of these individuals behind us.
Almost as soon as Jim Sullivan is arrested for murder, Tony Harwood, who has continued to deny being the trigger man, agrees to a plea deal.
Tony kind of sees the writing on the wall.
Harwood just decided that he would plead guilty, the negotiated plea for manslaughter, and in turn that he would testify against Jim Sullivan.
It took 2 years, but he finally was extradited back to Atlanta in 2004.
He got off the plane. He was wearing a single shoe because he had such terrible gout in his foot. But he gets off and gets taken to Fulton County Jail. And there's this sort of cumulative sigh of relief.
To be clear, Sullivan being tried for murder in Georgia is not double jeopardy. For one thing, it is a state case, and the previous one was a federal case, and that specifically was for arranging Lita's murder for hire over the phone.
The elected district attorney appoints me along with a couple of other lawyers to prosecute the case.
This was a huge puzzle of a case.
Right.
How did your puzzle-solving skills come into play?
There's no cutting corners, and you spread the pieces out, and then you figure out what fits and what doesn't fit. And that's kind of what the prosecution of James Sullivan was like. It was putting together all these different pieces so that we could make sure that the prosecution of the case was done accurately and with integrity.
What concerned you going into this trial?
He was rich. He was a white male. He had escaped the federal authorities before, and he had two of the best criminal defense attorneys representing him.
They are sharp, and if they can find a way out, they're going to find a way out.
There will not be one shred of physical evidence that links Jim Sullivan to this crime.
Jim has eluded justice so many times that there's a real palpable fear that he's going to get away with it, that he's going to elude justice again.
After nearly 20 years, Jim Sullivan is finally on trial here in Fulton County for the murder of his wife, Lita. For her heartbroken parents, this day couldn't come soon enough.
The pain, believe it or not, it increases. It does not decrease. The shock decreases. The depression decreases. But the pain continues.
It was an A-team of prosecutors, great courtroom performers.
Clint Rucker was the lead prosecutor, and Anna Grain, Kelly Hill, Sheila Ross.
And the evidence will show that the person who sent that hitman to Lita's door is the only person in the world who could have profited from her death. It is the only person in the world who met Tony Harwood and paid him off for killing her. And is the only person in the world who fled halfway around the world to avoid facing you.
Jury was 9 women and 3 men.
The jury is also racially mixed.
Jim Sullivan had Ed Garland and Don Samuel. Again, the people who won that big courtroom victory against the feds.
What the state relies on is 2 types of evidence. Circumstantial evidence, and then the testimony of con men.
The state initially started out the nature of the crime and what happened that morning.
I heard 2 sounds. They sounded to me like steel hitting steel.
I just didn't want to believe that it was a gun. And so I hesitated for a second, and then I really knew that it was a gun.
She was able to squeeze my hand each time I spoke with her, like she understood what I was saying. And for many, many years after this, I thought that's all it was. And then one day I realized that she was comforting me more than I was comforting her. That was the sort of lady I felt she was.
They had the phone calls that the FBI had found.
There was a call from this room to Mr. Sullivan's home at 7:44 in the morning.
But all this testimony notwithstanding, It's Belinda Trahan and Tony Harwood who everybody wants to hear from.
Belinda Trahan was the most important witness in the case.
He told me that some white guy who wanted to take out his black wife. I didn't believe it.
Why not?
I've been with him for 3 years, over 3 years. I mean, I figured he met someone because we were on the outs.
Most chilling about Belinda's testimony is that she confirms that there was at least one failed attempt on Lita's life.
She testifies that when Tony had gone to Lita's house on January 13th, that she didn't come to the door. They drove back to North Carolina and told Belinda that, it didn't work.
But Belinda testifies that hearing that from her boyfriend left her incredulous.
I said, just don't even lie to me. I said, because anyone knows that if you wanted to get a woman to answer the door, all you would have to do is take flowers to the door.
Did you in any way mean for that to be a suggestion as to how to get the job accomplished?
No, not at all.
Here's Belinda Trahan, and she is falling on the sword about what she did.
She suggested the flowers.
She suggested the flowers, and she admitted that on the stand.
You brought in the diner booth where they sat. Why couldn't you just tell the jury and show pictures?
I want you to see the puzzle once it's all put together. Yeah, I can show you the box. I can show you a photograph of it. But when I put it together and I show it to you, you'll never forget it.
Pushed the paper across the table like this, and then Tony put his hand on it and took it from there.
And there was a particular moment when she is asked to stand up in court and identified the person she witnessed give Tony Harwood an envelope full of money.
Please, point him out.
It's right there. He can't even make eye contact.
Your Honor, may the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant, James Sullivan.
But if prosecutors feel like Belinda Trahan's testimony is helping their case, they have to know that it's just as big a risk to put Tony Harwood on the stand.
Can you show the jurors the body language Mr. Sullivan used and the tone of voice, if it's possible, that he used when he was explaining to you that his wife, Lita, was a problem?
You know, I've got this wife of mine up in Atlanta, and she is just trying to take everything I've got. And I don't know what to do about it. I need someone to take care of my problem. Do you know anybody who can possibly take care of my problem for me? Because I need some help here.
We could prove Tony Harwood and James Sullivan actually met each other. So I spent the first part of Tony Harwood's examination confirming his signature on the hotel receipt.
And the signature, Johnny Kerr.
The fact that he actually went to the flower shop.
Who actually went inside the flower shop to purchase the flowers?
I did.
They had Tony Harwood saying that he was the one who made the collect call to Jim Sullivan's house.
What did you say to him?
I said, Merry Christmas. And he said, I understand. And that was it.
What were you trying to convey to Mr. Sullivan by giving him that signal, those code words?
That his problem was taken care of.
The defense had their chance to cross-examine Harwood. Not a single question. The two key witnesses were, of course, Belinda Trahan and Tony Harwood. And so, in closing arguments, the defense assailed their credibility.
You should reject everything that came out of his mouth. Harwood says envelope in the bathroom. She says an envelope at this booth over here.
Garland presents to the jury a letter-sized envelope stuffed with bills. Harwood had said it was all cash in $20 bills.
See, oops, some of it fell out, and some more. It won't fit in an envelope. The whole story just doesn't make sense.
In your closing arguments, you actually brought in a doorbell. Why? What was the point?
I wanted the jurors to have that sense of what Lita Sullivan experienced right before her murder.
An ordinary moment.
In an ordinary moment. The second reason why I did it is because James Sullivan liked to read books. And one of his favorite authors wrote a book called For Whom the Bell Tolls.
I am going to ask you through your verdict of guilty to each and every count to tell James Vincent Sullivan for whom the bell tolls. Tell him that it tolls for thee. For you. For you.
And then I rang the doorbell 3 times.
As the jury goes out to deliberate, I think there's a real fear. Are they going to do it this time, or is it going to be like every other time?
I do not see this as a slam dunk for the state.
There's this anxiety. You're worried, but you're hopeful. I don't care who you talk to that does this kind of work as a litigator. They will tell you, oh, I can look at the jurors and I probably can tell you what they're going to do. No, you don't. You don't.
This is breaking news.
We do have breaking news at this hour. The jury having reached a verdict in the trial of Jim Sullivan.
The jury came back within a few hours on the same day.
It was so silent, and the tension was just palpable.
There's this anxiety. You don't know what it's going to be. You don't know how it's going to turn out. And you're worried, but you're hopeful.
It's hard not to think of Lita's family, her parents especially, after so many fits and starts to win justice for their firstborn child. It comes down to this moment.
The judge says,
"Ma'am, would you publish the verdict?"
And then from that moment until they get finished, nobody is breathing.
Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, James Vincent Sullivan, guilty of malice murder.
I got a chance to hug Emory McClinton. I had never been hugged so tight before. This was his baby. And we had finally, after 19 years, brought that man a sense of satisfaction. I'll never forget it. The conviction of James Sullivan was the biggest puzzle that I had solved in my career. And it is one that gave me the most satisfaction that I had ever experienced as a prosecutor.
The court hears victim impact statements. What a loss it was to have Lita gone from their lives.
I dream of Lita often. She is smiling and walking in my direction, and I in hers. But we never reach each other.
The jury came back and gave him life in prison without the possibility of parole.
I am so very pleased, and I'm happy. What we were waiting for was something in our judicial system, something to happen and to bring it all together, and that's what you see today.
Why did it take 20 years, do you think?
It goes back to the resources.
He had privilege?
White privilege, completely. He knew how to manipulate people, and he had the resources to do that.
You've got a black victim, you've got a white defendant. Did race hover in this courtroom over this case at all?
I think in our criminal justice system, unfortunately, race always permeates throughout a case. But I'm thankful to say the evidence in the case overcame that racial component.
They never received any money. Is there money? Where is this money?
He's been able to secret his money. For the McClintons, seeing him rot in a prison in South Georgia brings them a whole lot more satisfaction.
This is a woman who you never met, I've never met, most of the people involved in this case never met her, and yet her life really made an impact. When somebody dies in this kind of manner, they don't stop being a member of the family, they don't stop being a member of the community, they never stop mattering.
David, Tony Harwood was released from prison in 2018 after serving his 20-year sentence. Jim Sullivan remains behind bars with no possibility of parole.
As for the other two men who were seen at that flower shop, no one else was ever charged. That is our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Deborah Roberts. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.